First time on Tea Time and Talent Acquisition, we don't have somebody from the talent acquisition space. Well, not specifically. He has worked in TA, but as a HR operations manager for one of the biggest companies on the planet, he's also worked in pretty much every field you could think of. But the conversation today is focused around what the role of the hiring manager is. Having been one himself, he's going to break down a little bit more about that role and how it links to the talent acquisition function. So here is what you've got coming up in today's episode.
But break it down, basically. Make it easy for someone who has no understanding and no clue what you're doing. And then how would you explain it to them so that you are equipped, and then you can build on that, but take more time up front, build a relationship, ask good questions, and really make sure that you understand what they're looking for and what the business is about, because that will help with pipeline building. And also it will help once you send the first CVs across. And another element might be also about really looking at the business and how is the company representing itself externally. I sometimes feel like we're pitching one thing, and then the candidate goes to the website of the company or is kind of searching for the role, and it doesn't appear like what they're saying at all. And depending on the power of the hiring manager, who they are and what they're looking for, they may also need to look at that a little bit and say, well, we need to be aligned. The message has to kind of has to match how we're representing ourselves. So I think that's a lot of responsibility for sure.
I highly recommend you get a notepad and pen, a coffee, tea, if you prefer, and all your notes on your phone, and you just sit and absorb the information that Martin shares. It's going to come at you very, very quickly. There's going to be lots of different and small intricacies to this conversation that you can go and start implementing today. But do it right, and you'll see much, much greater success in how your relationships with your hiring managers look. This is a really good, insightful conversation from someone who has been there, done it as a recruiter, in HR, and as a hiring manager. So thank you for joining, and I wish you all the best. Good. Welcome to Tea Time with Talent Acquisition, the podcast aimed at fostering knowledge and sharing stories within the vibrant talent acquisition community. I'm your host, Eden, and for the next hour or so, I'm going to be joined by a people-centric leader with over 18 years of extensive expertise in HR management, ranging from recruitment, scaled employee support, process design and optimization, HR consulting and payroll, you name it, he's probably done it. Working with one of the largest big tech companies on the planet, we are approaching this conversation from a different perspective today. Having recently been in the role of the hiring manager himself, he's built a successful partnership with both internal and external recruiting teams. And using this, he wants to share what the role of a hiring manager truly is and how knowing this can help us in the talent acquisition field become more successful. So when you're ready, grab your favorite tea or coffee if you prefer, and join me in welcoming today's guest, HR Operations Manager, Martin Pauser-Cowman. So thank you so much for joining.
Thank you, Eden. Thank you. Great. And thanks for having me.
It's a genuine pleasure. And like I said, I went through your career before, and obviously there's so many elements in HR, and you laughed when I said you've probably touched it all, and I think you probably have from how I read your profile and got to know you over the time. And I feel like this conversation is going to be slightly different from all the others I've had, but in a positive way, about giving a different angle, different element to the conversation. But before we get into the nuts and bolts of the role of hiring manager and kind of peeling back those layers, I do like to start these podcasts off with the same question. So I guess you're gonna have to get your thinking cap back on a little bit more to when you was doing the recruitment side for this one. So from your opinion, what makes a successful recruitment or talent acquisition team?
I think that's a very good question. Thank you. I think with every team, right, it's about working closely together. And that is probably kind of the triangle between who are you recruiting for? So who's the company or the hiring manager? Then being fair and equitable to the candidates. So building that relationship as well. And obviously you play the biggest part in connecting both as a recruiter, but often you're supported by other people within your team as well. So it's kind of that kind of relationship, that triangle relationship, I think is very important.
So being able as a collective team or an individual to I guess, hold court with various types of people, as it were, and hold court. Where did that come from?
That's very profound.
Wow.
I
Have I
love
been
it.
watching something? No. I feel like I've just gone back in time for a second. Wow.
It's very
Anyways, hold court with various stakeholders. I've even thrown myself, but having that ability to build, those relationships, but also connect and kind of be that conversationalist between different groups of people.
absolutely.
Okay. So then coming down to what this topic is, right? It's the hiring manager's perspective. So you were in that position of hiring for your team. Fundamentally, what is the role of the hiring manager? And before you answer, this is to specifically to those who maybe haven't been in that role themselves. We all allude to it, we might understand, we think we know what it is, but if you haven't actually done it yourself, maybe sometimes the nuances are different. So from your perspective, role of the hiring manager.
Sure, sure, absolutely. Look, as a manager, right, you're responsible for an outcome of your team. You have to have a business impact as well. So you have to think about, okay, who do I need to achieve that outcome? What people do I have already? What do I not have? And where would I find that person, right? And that's the relationship back with the recruiter. I think as a recruiter, it's very important to understand that dynamic.
Yeah.
Because often there's pressure behind it as well. Either it's time, often people want the new person to start as quickly as possible, of course.
Yesterday is obviously the answer I usually get.
Absolutely, absolutely. You can't be fast enough. Um, but also, there might be other things going on within the team as well, why
Mm.
someone is looking for someone new, right? It could also be that there's current issues going on and they're trying to mitigate that and bring new and fresh pair of eyes into the team as well. So there's various different reasons why someone is hiring, but generally it's like the business is investing and they want to grow the team, which is great news. So as a recruiter, I think it's really important to understand that dynamic, but also be very clear about what is the hiring manager looking for.
Yeah.
Like, what are the skills that they need? And sometimes it's about what do they have already and what do they not have, and
Hmm.
what's kind of the add-on, because sometimes people they're looking for the same, or especially let's say someone has left and they need to replace. So they're looking for a copy of that person. And that's really difficult anyway. But it's kind of about what's the fresh perspective that a new
Yeah.
candidate will bring naturally anyway, because we're all unique, so it's going to be different anyway. But kind of having that conversation and be really clear about what are they looking for and where the compromises as well. And you as a hiring manager have to think about it too. Like, is there a specific skill set? Of course, they need to be able to do the job, but that can be sometimes quite clear from a CV then as well, so it gives you an indication. But what are the things that people can learn and how critical is that? I often find behaviors are actually more important than just hard skills. If you have a smart person and they really want to learn, they can learn anything, right? But it's kind of comes down to attitude sometimes as well, a little bit about how they're approaching that. And that is sometimes a difficult conversation to have with the hiring manager, depending on where they are in their journey.
Hmm.
Some of them might also be quite junior, and they haven't done that very often. So kind of having an open conversation up front will probably help to gauge it.
I think it's mindful to be note as a recruiter as well that our job is to find the talent by all means, and of course we want to find the person that matches the best, go through those conversations. But the hiring manager's responsibility is so much larger than just finding the talent. It's also about managing the team, managing the expectations that the business has for them. So I think sometimes we need to probably be mindful of, okay, this is my full time job is to get you this person, or part of my full time job, but your full-time job, this is one very small part potentially, depending on, I guess, where the growth is going to be happening in that team. It might take on more responsibility or not. Um, why do you think it's important for manager and recruiter to be aligned at the beginning before anything actually starts?
Ultimately, I think this will impact the experience for the candidate. If
Yeah.
there's disconnect from the very beginning, you might be wasting your time as a recruiter because you're tapping into a talent pool that is actually not fit for purpose, right? Or you're engaging with candidates and then later on it turns out that wasn't really what the hiring manager was looking for. So you wasted your time, but worse, you wasted the candidate's times as well, right? So
Mm.
that's definitely not what you want. And it's your reputation as the recruiter, right? So if they don't have that great experience, then candidates will remember that too. I mean, they're assessing both ways, right? So we're
Yeah.
assessing a candidate, but the candidate's also assessing the process and the people that they're interacting with. So that's why that relationship, I think, is really key.
Hmm.
And be very clear and upfront, and also understanding as a recruiter about what's the business about, right? So sometimes you have to do more selling, right? And
Yeah.
how can the hiring manager help? Like, what information do you need from them to give you that kind of pitch, to help you to make that kind of first connection, or also help you along the way? I mean, sometimes the process can go on for quite some time. So if someone needs to come in and help you we need someone else from the business to talk to the candidate directly, then why not? So have that kind of open agreement from the beginning,
Mm.
that they're seeing this as a partnership and not just I'm telling you who to hire and now give me the perfect candidate. All right,
Yeah.
it doesn't really work like that. So that's why I think it's really important. But ultimately, it comes down to candidate experience, in my view.
Yeah, no, and I think I agree quite heavily on that as well. And look, processes can change. Someone hasn't got a definitive 100% yes from everyone. We might need to add an extra step in. But I think when you're adding steps in for the sake of it, it doesn't really make sense. But having the awareness at the beginning, look, hey, Martin, this is the process, and we might do an extra step here. You can at least be upfront to the candidate and say, look, this is a traditional process. We
Mhm.
might have that step at that point. So everyone's on the same page. Candidates get pissed off when they don't know what's happening, pure and simple. Similar to you and I, when you don't know where you stand, you just start getting annoyed. Um, so approaching this from different perspective, right? So a lot of the things you're saying is obviously around candidates and hire manager together. I agree, but I want to know what can a hire manager do for us in
Mhm.
kind of as a recruiter, because I think that would then illuminate to any listener, okay, actually I might need to support my hiring managers a bit more, or actually they're doing a great job, or
Mhm.
maybe I'm in an environment that's not, maybe for me to set myself up for success. Because ultimately people who listen to this want to upskill and grow their own careers. That's the focus of what we do is, we work for a company, but we grow ourselves. So what does a good hiring manager do to support the process to a recruiter?
For sure, for sure. I mean, set making it a business priority, right? So if the business needs to produce an outcome, of course, that's one thing.
Yeah.
But hiring in this instance is part of your responsibility as a hiring manager. That's part of your job. That's what you have to do. So treat it like that, right? So it's a priority for you. B, it's kind of making sure that you set time aside for those interviews, for those recruitment initial conversations, for maybe another call with the candidate maybe later on in the process, where it's kind of last stage and you really want to make sure that someone is fully bought in,
Yeah.
but also be honest about what the business is about, what your team is about, because otherwise, yes, you may get the candidate and they start, but how long are they staying? And then you have to start the process all over again, right? So be
Mm.
upfront about things that may not be working, and that's why you need that person to help you to actually make it better. I think that that's really good. Otherwise, you have to start all over again. And another element might be also about uh, really looking at the business and how is the company representing itself externally. I sometimes
Right.
feel like we're pitching one thing, and then the candidate goes to the website of the company or is kind of searching for the role, and it doesn't appear like what they're saying at all.
Hmm.
Right? So, what are the company values? Can they talk about that a little bit more as well? And is that reflected in how the company is presenting itself externally? And depending on the power of the hiring manager, who they are and what they're looking for, they may also need to look at that a little bit and say, well, we need to be aligned. The message has to kind of has to match how we're representing ourselves. So I think that's a lot of responsibility for sure.
I think the vast majority of organizations these days have, values, they have documents, and HR teams have done a great job at making sure that it is out there in the world, internally, externally, obviously through the employer branding. But you touched upon a point at the beginning, which was having time. I
Mhm.
find that is probably the hardest part, is making a hiring manager view what talent teams do as a time invested exercise at the beginning. I'll give you an example. A conversation I had, a lady called Andrea. She works at a team called Contentful in Berlin. She's helping me with a blog. this is a nice little plug for her blog that's coming up.
Yes.
Brilliant lady. And she was basically saying like she had to really fight at the beginning. She loves it now; it's all changed now. So, but she had to fight at the beginning to get the hiring managers to give her the half an hour at the beginning to say, look, this is why it's worth our time. So
Mhm.
I've seen firsthand myself, through her, through others, I have this conversation that sometimes it's a pulling your teeth exercise just to get the hiring manager to say, look, get on a call, so we all can get into on the same page. In that situation, what advice would you give to somebody who maybe needs to have that serious conversation with the hiring manager? Say, look, you're not quote unquote pulling your weight. You're not giving me the time. You're not giving me what I need to make this relationship a successful partnership.
Yeah, yeah. Maybe it's having the upfront conversation about, okay, when are you expecting this person to start? So obviously tomorrow, right? So you have that straight away, but let's make it more realistic. So your time to hire will be impacted by that process and by any delays, right?
Yeah.
So of course you need to find the pipeline, you need to build it, you need to engage with candidates. But once they're in the process, you want that to be as smooth as possible. So yes, it's priority and yes, it's time, but it's also maybe, how quickly is feedback delivered, in which way, so that you agree on a couple of logistics upfront and
Mm.
maybe also agree. So have that kind of, it's like a little contract. It's a verbal contract
Yeah,
that you
I
may
like
have
that.
with your manager, with your hiring manager, and say like, okay, so what's a rough timeline by when you will submit your feedback, right? When will I hear from you? And kind
Mm.
of maybe even writing it down up front a little bit so you have that kind of agreement, because every step along the way will delay the process if it's not delivered on time. There might be a way as well. So do they have a substitute? So who could step in if you're not around, right? So
Yeah.
is there someone else who could make that decision, especially for very senior positions, or actually it doesn't really matter for candidate experience who it is, but you don't want to delay it and then not be able to get back to people on time. So I think there is a lot to that and kind of having that kind of informal contractual agreement up front.
I love that. We do something slightly different. Well, no, slightly similar, but not granular. So, for example, when we have a new partnership happening, a new job, whatever, we'll basically say, look, let's say we qualify on a Monday, expect CV or expect feedback by this date, first batch of CVs by this date, and if this round goes successful, we expect to close it by this date.
Hmm.
Because again, rough average turnaround times, etc. And then say nothing happens in the first week, we always go back on the day and say, look, this is why, this is the situation, this is how many we've approached, this is why you're not seeing people. So there's that element, but I really like the point of the feedback timeframes, because my colleague does that on the freelance side where she books in meetings, when are you free to interview? That sort of stuff, because obviously contracts can
Hmm.
move a lot quicker. But I like that element, even taking it on the internal side and being a bit more. I don't want to say the word pushy,
Yeah,
but
it's a bit.
stand your ground a little bit more and say
Yeah.
like, look, this is when we're speaking, this is when you CVs, this is when I need feedback, and then we change the dates if we need to, but then it holds everyone accountable.
Absolutely. It's the accountability piece, and it comes back to it is a business priority as well. Hiring
Absolutely.
is part of the job, so you have to deliver on those priorities as well, and every step along the way. And yes, when and how will feedback be delivered? For sure, it's very important. Or how many interviews are you able to conduct on a day?
Mm.
Or which days wouldn't suit you at all. I mean, it's these very small things that can actually make a difference in really cutting down that time to hire. And I often feel like the interviews are done very quickly, but feedback can take quite some time. And the longer you wait, it depends on your notes, but I wrote them down still a lot, only a few weeks ago, was kind of written down. I couldn't read my handwriting properly, so I'm like, well, that's not going to work. So I'd rather do it faster now and obviously type it down, but do it in the moment. I think sometimes you have that kind of feeling, you know straight away. Did you
Yeah.
click and connect with someone? And the longer you wait, sometimes other things take over. This important other email is coming in. So suddenly this is out of your mind and then you forget a little bit. But sometimes it's also good to take a step back and assess if you have multiple candidates in a row for sure. But I think timely is really important because there's a lot more to it for sure. And you
I,
owe it to the candidate as well at the end of the day.
I'm like a dog with a bone as soon as an interview's done. If I don't
Yeah,
have
yeah,
feedback within 24 hours, I'm like, okay, what's happening? Explain the
it should be.
situation.
I think you should be able to say like, okay, is it a thumbs up or a thumbs down, or are you kind of in the middle? I mean, that kind
Yeah,
of feeling and the sense you get very quickly in an
for sure.
interview. Sometimes you get in the first 5 minutes, you have an idea about, okay, where's this going here? So you do. I mean, then it depends on how detailed the process is and how much you want to write down as well. But you get a sense very quickly. So yes, you should be able to make that assessment within the 24 hours for sure.
The other thing that when we spoke, when we obviously did the preparation for this, you mentioned about seeing job descriptions from a different lens,
Hmm.
from what recruiters are seeing, the market seeing, but obviously what the hiring manager is seeing as well. And that's really stuck with me since we spoke about this. Because I maybe a different phrase, but I always say like between the lines and what are the things you want but you can't necessarily put on a job description
Yeah.
for whatever reason. How can a hiring manager help educate recruiters on that then? I mean, not necessarily how, but I was asked what have you done with your teams, internal and
Yeah.
external? Like what actually worked to get a better return on investment for the time?
For sure, for sure. I mean, when you read a lot of job descriptions, some of them there you see both spectrums. Sometimes I feel some of them is like an essay. It's like pages and pages of description of tasks and all of these things. And I feel like, okay, but candidates get lost in that a little bit at times. So how
Easy
can we
apply,
cut
move on.
Absolutely. How can we cut that down, right? And what's the bare minimum? I mean, what's the minimum qualifications that someone needs to have? And
Hmm.
then, of course, there is a lot of nice to haves, right? The list is probably endless, but it doesn't help, in my view, when it's blown up and it's endless amount of text, right? You want to describe who the company is, you want to describe who the team is, ideally, like
Hmm.
who are you, what is your team, what are they doing, and then keep it to a minimum. And then have the list of preferred for sure. And even then, you can challenge it a little bit, like how important is that actually,
Hmm.
and have that conversation. Not everything needs to go in a job description, in my view. It just makes it too long. And I feel like there's candidates out there that will assess themselves against that description. So the longer it is, the more likely someone will say, well, I'm not ticking all of these boxes, so I'm not even going for it because what's the point? I will never get that job. Others, I might be much more assertive and kind of, yeah, or there's no problem, whatever. I take two of them and I will go for it, right? And I think there's a big
Yep.
difference also between how men and women are assessing job descriptions as well. There's a lot of research around that as well. And obviously you want a nice diverse pipeline as well. So there is an element of that as well that will help you to create that pipeline and make it as diverse as possible.
So when you obviously created your job descriptions with and then filtered them out to the internal team and any external teams that you worked with, um, how did you kind of go through that spec with them from your perspective? Was it just here's the job description, ask me questions, or did you sit down with them? Did you do roundups with them? I mean, what was your kind of actual process?
Usually, I think it's often easier to rip something apart that's already there than starting from scratch, right? So ideally, yes, you have already written kind of an idea around how would you describe the team, and you have spent some time already thinking about what am I looking for. I think that's
Mm.
the prep work the hiring manager should do. If you do that, you can then ask more clarifying questions. But I think that can work quite well. So you have something and then you go through it and then you fine tune whatever is there. The other option is to start from scratch together, but it's more time intensive. And I think it puts the responsibility more on the recruiter when it's actually the hiring manager's job. Obviously, you can advise because you have worked maybe with many other clients before. So you have seen
Yeah.
already some good examples, and especially depends on where the company the hiring manager is and how experienced they are. But often there's also internal information that they already have that they should just provide as well and to make it easier. But that fine tuning is really important. And then also ask them to check it out, like where's this role posted?
Hmm.
On which platforms and is it appearing correctly? You know what my pet peeve is when there's typos in those descriptions where I'm like, okay, you had all of that time and then you're asking the candidate to have great attention to detail. I mean, immediately, they're assessing it. Well, I need to have it, you don't have it. So let's
I
be
uh,
clear on
I've
that.
started to call teams out on that. Maybe this
Yeah.
is just I had the same problem, right? And don't get me wrong, I'm not the grammar police by any means, but if I use it as as a business development tactic, to be honest. So if I see something where they've called it like a senior front end developer, but the job description reads as a back end developer, or they've called it a full stack engineer, then in the job it's like a mobile developer, I'll message the person or whoever is the most senior person in the HR team and say, hey, I'm not sure if you've seen this, like this is your spec and this is what it's saying, just as a heads up. It works, I'd say 80-90% of the time. I always get I get a response out of it.
Yeah.
Some are happy, some are a bit like, go away. But a
You
response
know
is a
what?
response in my world.
Absolutely. It's feedback and it's up to them whether they take it on board or not. But I think it's really important to call
Mm,
it out because yeah, if it doesn't add up, like it will make your life so much harder as a recruiter already because you are engaging with very smart people out there, right? And they are assessing. Again, I think they're really assessing the process, the company, and you in the same way as you are assessing them. And people
yeah,
forget that. They think, hey, they're in the power seat, right? So we're hiring and we are putting this effort in here. It works the other way around, especially now in the environment where for specific jobs there is a lot of competition out there. And at the end of the day, the candidate will choose where they want to go and what feels right to them, and you want to make sure that the first impression is right. So the partnership on that job description, I think, is very important, but the hiring manager should do the homework and present something, and then you can always add or remove, but it's easier than starting completely from scratch. But again, it probably depends also about where they are in their career, how often have they hired before, what kind of company are they, and maybe they need a bit of help for sure. And if you
yeah.
have experience in that field, then why not?
Well, it doesn't necessarily mean you can't let them do it first and then tweak and guide it after.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think that's probably the right way forward. And on comment on we're being assessed as well. I think the last 2-3 years, more than anything, have really made candidates take note and go, okay, who am I actually working for now? Because obviously layoff after layoff is still happening. Let's say how it is.
Mhm.
Being sold a pipe dream 6 months later just to be let go. I think as we start getting into some level of normality, I think we're pretty much there. Although layoffs are happening, I don't think we're going to see the boom that we saw six,
Mhm.
7 years ago for a long time. So this is reality. This is what it is mostly. So I think companies need to recognize, okay, we're being assessed through a magnifying glass for the top talent. And then the utilization of AI more is that everyone else is coming in through that way. So we want the top talent, or we want the ones who are specifically interested in us. We need to make sure we're putting our best foot forward in every single component, from the employee branding to the job descriptions to the processes, referral programs, whatever. Otherwise, we're just going to be one of hundreds of companies they're applying to instead of the one they want. That's the difference, I think, now.
It really is. It really is. Yes, and you have to be quite organized, right? Because you as a recruiter, you're engaging with so many candidates, right? So who have you spoken to about what? And that's important because they only have your interaction, but they
Right.
may also interact with lots of other recruiters from other companies as well. So yeah, top talent is in high demand for sure. And you're absolutely right. The insecurity now around the job market. So you want to make damn sure if you're changing jobs, especially if you're coming from one employment to another, it was the right decision because there's always risk with those kind
Mm,
of things as well. And then it depends on their personal circumstances as well. And maybe that's important to engage from a recruiter side as well to understand like what's the motivation, or why
100%.
are they doing it in the first place? And that's why what are they actually looking for and assessing, well, is that the right move for them as well? It's not really up to you to make that, but you can definitely gauge that with the questions you're asking them.
Well, that's the first 20 minutes of every call I have.
Hmm.
Why are we speaking? What do you want?
Hmm.
Tell me exactly what you want. And from there, it's this role isn't right for you, or
Yeah,
it
yeah.
is, and take it from there. And it's always, I think, our role as recruiters, it's just to be the ones who hold the most knowledge, from the hiring manager to the candidate to the company to the process. We are the knowledge keepers. And I think we also need to be mindful of sometimes our job isn't right for that particular person at that particular
Mhm.
time. And just to say, look, hey, Martin, you're wasting your time. As much as I would
I
love to hire you, you're wasting your time. Let's just call it quits and I'll circle back in the future. And that's it. instead
You
of
know
round
what?
peg, square hole, square peg, round hole. There we go.
Absolutely, I like that. That is so important. But you know what? That also means you have to put your own biases aside because you could say, well, look, I'm getting paid for placing someone, or you're so ambitious. You said like you put so much time into this. Now you really want this candidate to take the role. But it's not really about you at the end of the
Mm,
day, right? It's about the candidate and is this the right fit? Because either, again, if it's not the right fit, they have to start the process all over again. This person's disappointed, the hiring manager is disappointed, nothing is working out. And that's why it's like, I love that you said, like, be honest with yourself as well as a recruiter and take yourself out of it. Yes, you would like to make this process successful for both sides, but being honest and saying, look, this may not be for you, and that's totally fair. Even if they don't see that straight away either sometimes. But you, as you said, I love that you're the knowledge keeper, and that's why, yeah, it's a lot of responsibility and power that you have as a recruiter in that regard as well. And then just be honest about it. So I
yeah.
love that.
Honesty is the only way forward. Like, I mean, you have to be, otherwise you just get called out on LinkedIn these days if you just lie to people, and no one wants that. Let's be honest, it's career ending. One phrase or two phrases that have worked really really well for me, and I do encourage people to try it. It kind of disarms a little bit because it just takes away any BS from the process. And one of it is obviously I'll give you my opinion on what I think. You can take it or leave it. If you say we go for it, I back you 110%. But if you say no, this is your chance to get out now.
Mm-hmm.
That way, it's on 100% on them. And then I
Mm-hmm.
will always back them 110% if I do think that they want to go for it. And the other one is, especially this works really good towards the end of the process. And you start talking about other opportunities and how they all start comparing. And some people start getting a little bit closed up at that point, which is natural. They, get wary of recruiters asking questions. And
Mm-hmm.
I'll say to them, look, Martin, it doesn't matter what role you take. I want you to take my role if you think it's right, but you'll take what's right for you. And at the end of the day, we'll both celebrate with a beer because you found something, or
Mm-hmm.
wine, or if you don't drink, whatever. Insert a beverage here,
The
right?
mocktail.
And when you do that, it's like you can always hear it on the phone or see in the call, like, whoa, okay, like now I can breathe a second, because then they realize, okay, you're not pushing them towards anything particular. There's subtleties that you make, of course,
Yeah.
but you can just say, look, take the job that's right for you. And I think that also comes back and circle all the way back to the hiring manager discussion is you only know the job that's right for them by knowing what the job truly is, not what
Mm-hmm.
the company perceives it to be, not what the hiring manager necessarily perceives it to be, but what it truly is. And the only way you know that is by asking in-depth questions at the beginning, understanding throughout, and then having that knowledge to see if it's right for the right person.
Absolutely, absolutely. You're right. It's about the candidate and it's their decision at the end of the day, and you have to give them that um, kind of power to say like it's up to you.
Mm,
And you're the partner there. You want to help them to find a really cool job that meets all of their needs and it's exciting for them as well, right? It's about helping them as well, but also you have a contract with the company, and you also want to make sure that they're getting the best person that they're looking for. But who can help with that as well? And is that always true? Because people have different ideas, and the hiring manager has biases as well.
yeah.
Especially about are they replacing someone? Is this a brand new role? Has this role been? Was it there before? Like, how long has the role already been vacant? Kind of, there's a lot of nuances in that can really help to then have a better conversation with your candidates.
So someone who's listening, it's 2025, right? They're a recruiter and IC, maybe a leader, whoever, right? It doesn't matter. What's the number one piece of advice that you would give them if they're working with a difficult hiring manager today that's going to help them try and get to success quicker for their role, for their company, for their team?
Yeah, excellent question. I think it's really spend more time upfront with the person you're hiring for. Get
Hmm.
to know them, maybe build a bit of a personal relationship as well, understand a bit more what's going on there, what pressures are they under, or how are they feeling this, have they done this before, rather than rushing into the solution mode and kind of going in with your head like, this is what I need to get out of it, and then let's get started. I sometimes feel like we're rushing too quickly into the doing rather than taking a little bit of a step back and then kind of really understanding what are we recruiting for. And as a recruiter, that's hard because you may have multiple different profiles that you have to
Yeah.
recruit for, right? From tech to sales to administration in some roles, there's a huge variety. But that takes time to build that knowledge, even understanding around what does that actually mean. And you're not an engineer, right? Or you're not a salesperson. Like to a degree as a recruiter you are, but
Yeah.
for the
Yeah.
business, it's kind of yes, you don't need to be the absolute expert, but they have experts in the team that can talk about that and break it down. Like sometimes they say, like, how do I explain it? Or some recruiter ask me, okay, explain this to me, explain this like you would explain it to your grandmother. To make it really simple and easy. No offense to grandmothers, but to
Who
kind
knows?
of
We might have some very high tech grandmothers listening. I doubt
absolutely
it, but we might do.
apologies
You
for
never
that.
know.
But make it break it down basically. Make it
Yeah.
easy for someone who has no understanding and no clue what you're doing. And then how would you explain it to them so that you are equipped and then you can build on that, but take more time up front. Build a relationship, ask good questions, and really make sure that you understand what they're looking for and what the business is about, because that will help with pipeline building. And also, it will help once you send the first CVs across and you ask for feedback. If they're all rejected, then you're like, okay, like I'm on the wrong track. Then also, it's okay to pause again and say, okay, I think we need to have another catch-up meeting first before we proceed here, because right now we don't seem to be going in the right direction. So it's also
Yeah.
okay to say, I got it wrong the first time. Let's have another meeting again.
That's also just trust in your own ability as well, isn't it? It's just being comfortable that you are the specialist recruiter, and if you're recruiting for something you've never recruited for before, we all make mistakes. We learn. I didn't know what the hell front end development was until you start recruiting for it, and then you just build that knowledge. Martin, I really appreciate you taking time and going through this with me. Like I said, it was a completely different angle, but there's so many elements that you've spoken about in this discussion, which I'm hoping someone has been, or people have been listening to, got notepads and pens, they've got their notes on their phone open, and they're just taking little nuances to try and implement. But if someone wanted to pick this conversation up with you further, they wanted to get to know you a little bit more, have a discussion with you around HR, recruitment, or anything around that world, where is the best place that they can come and find you?
Yeah, no, people can definitely find me on LinkedIn. So if people want to connect, no problems.
Cool. I'll put your LinkedIn into the feed somewhere, the description somewhere, wherever it sits on these videos. I don't know these days. But thank you so much for taking the time. I appreciate it.
Ian, thank you so much. Thanks for having me. It was a pleasure talking to you.
Enjoy. Bye bye.
You too. Bye.